Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Cross IT Lunch and Learn. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today as we talk about script parameters, why you would want to use them, and just some different methods for passing those parameters to our scripts. All right, so let's start with that as we, excuse me. Okay. All right, so one of the reasons that you would want to use subscripts, of course, is to break a large script into smaller chunks that then allow those chunks of code to be reused in different ways. You can maintain the code in one place and then call it from many different places. But typically when you do that, you can't just reuse that chunk of code over and over again without making some subtle changes and some slight tweaks and things like that. And so that is where the use of parameters allows that subscript to execute with those differences depending on what the value is that is passed. So that's why we want to use script parameters, and so that's what we're going to look at and dig into here today. All right, so how do we do that? All right, well, it's couple things. Obviously, when you call the script, that's when you want to include that parameter to go along. You can include a parameter anytime a script is called, whether it's from a button, a script trigger, or from another script. Here's an example here that when you call the script from another script, you use the perform script step. You select the name of the script, and then the parameter is just the value then that is included at the end. Okay, as you see there. But then regardless of how that script or the subscript is initiated, the same function is used to capture the value of the script parameter, and is simply the function get script parameter. So can't get much easier than that. All right. Okay, so obviously the easiest way when you're working with parameters is just to pass a single value. And so we've got an example here where one of the things that you would probably do repeatedly is do a find operation, and maybe because of business rules or whatever, if no records are found, there's a very complex method for handling any errors, and you're not going to want to have to maintain that code in multiple places. So that's where you're actually able to pass the criteria for your find operation via a parameter and then get the result. Okay, and so that's what we have set up here. This is just a simple list of contacts that we've got, and I've set up a couple different scripts to go ahead and view what's going on here. Now, what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and take advantage of some developer tools so you guys can really see what is happening here today. And if you don't have these developer tools, don't worry, you actually do. That is with FileMaker here under the preferences. You can see that under the application section here on the general tab, there's a checkbox for using the advanced tools. So if that is not checked, these will not appear, but you can just simply check the box, restart FileMaker, and then you have access to these developer tools. All right, so we're going to go ahead and turn on the script debugger, which just pops up here in a window, and I'm going to go ahead and execute this first script. Now, as I mentioned before, you can actually have a button and actually pass the parameter directly to the script. I went ahead and set up separate scripts just to make things a little bit easier. So as you can see, it says I'm performing this script, which is to find contacts by state, and then just using these buttons up here, I'm able to step through the script. You'll see that now it's going to do that perform script step. There is my parameter, which is Pennsylvania. And then now I'm into my subscript, and you'll notice down here in the call stack, it is showing me what is actually running, the order of events. And you can also see in the square brackets here very faintly that it's actually kind of giving me a preview of what parameter was passed along with that. So now I can go through making sure that I'm on the right layout. I enter find mode, I insert my parameter, I perform my find, and then I exit that script, then I exit the parent script, and now I'm left with 2,700 records. Okay, so again, same thing. If I do the Ohio residence, Go down through here, get into the first script. Now I call the second script with the Ohio parameter now. Again, this is running that same single value script that we had set up. Enter find mode, insert the value, and that's where we perform the find. And now we've got 1997 residents of Ohio that are in this imaginary database that we have created. All right, so pretty straightforward stuff when you're dealing with a single parameter, but typically when you're working in FileMaker, you typically need more than just a single parameter. However, FileMaker only passes a single parameter. That's why it's called script parameter, and then get script parameter is the function. But there are ways to encode multiple values into that single block of text. So that's what we're going to go ahead and dig into here now as we go forward. Now this is the first method that I used back when I was first introduced to the FileMaker platform probably 20 years ago. And that was to include some kind of special character, some kind of special combination of characters that's inserted in between each value. I chose the vertical pipe, but you can see there's some other combinations there of ones that can be used. And then once you have your parameter constructed with that separator character, then once you get to the subscript, then it's just a matter of taking the position function, which determines the location of the special characters in the string, and you can see it's spelled out there where you have your text, the string that you're searching for, where it's going to start in the string, and what occurrence you want it to tell you the position of. All right, and then with that information from the position function, then you're able to use the text functions of left, middle, and right to then extract each of the values that are in your parameter that you've passed to your script. All right, so for example, our script parameter calculation could look like this, where you just have string 1, and then we've got our vertical pipe, string 2, another vertical pipe, and then string 3. Now, of course, that could be all written out as just one quoted text string, but I broke it up this way so you could just see where those vertical pipes are going in. And then that's our parameter, and then once that parameter then is passed to our subscript, we would just have a series of calculations to get those values out. Typically, the way I like to work is I declare my local variables or script variables, single $sign variables if you prefer, right at the beginning of the script if I'm passing it parameters, so that everything is defined at the beginning. So value number 1 would use the left function, where we just get the script parameter, find the position of that first separator character, and then subtract 1 and then get that number of characters out. Where it gets a little bit more complex, as you can see, is once we get to like the middle values, we have to obviously use the middle function, which has another parameter that we need to use, which is we get the script parameter, then we have to get the position of the preceding separator character, and then we have to get the position of the trailing separator character, and then get the what's in between those two special characters. All right, and then of course the last value uses the right function, which again is we just get the script parameter as our text input, and then we figure out what's the overall length of the string, go back to that very last vertical pipe, and then go ahead and get that number of text characters. Okay, so that works very well. All right, it is a little bit harder to maintain, as you might guess, that usually you write a script that maybe takes 3 parameters, and as you use it you realize, oh man, if I added this 4th parameter, that's really going to help me out. So obviously your calculations you'd have to adjust, because you can't just throw it in at the end. You would have to make sure that the right function is for your last value, and then you would have to update the middle values accordingly, so that you're getting the right values out. So let me go ahead and turn on script debugger once more, so we can step through this. And then what I've chose for our example for the rest is to send an email. That's something that I do commonly in my solutions, because you have to maintain the parameters for the mail server, especially if you're using the send as SMTP mail option. You only want to have to maintain that in as few places as possible. So by assembling the message you're able to pass, the to, the from, the body, the subject, all that kind of stuff to, a subscript that then the only thing it does is actually then send the mail. So that's what we're going to look at here. So we've got script debugger on. Go ahead and click the button. All right. Now what I've done here is I've just kind of declared, because typically you would be calculating all of this stuff. So I just went ahead and set and defined 4 variables for the information that we're going to be passing, which is the to, the CC, subject, and message for our email. That's just formatted. So let me just step down through those steps here. And then the last thing is to then assemble, the parameter with those vertical pipes. And again, this is something that, when you're in the perform script step, you would be able to do all of this calculation right there. However, I don't like to do that just because I think it makes it easier to debug and see what's going on if I kind of do it this way. But that's a personal preference. That's not you have to do it this way. So that's how I have this set up. So let's go ahead and set up that parameter. All right, so now if I click on this button over here, that's going to bring up my data viewer so we can actually see what's going on. So you can see there's our 4 variables that we've defined as our calculations for the different things, and then our final parameter, and so it looks like this. And you can see here where there's an address, a vertical pipe, another email address, vertical pipe, subject, and then we get into the balance of the message. So it looks like everything is working there. All right, so now as I continue to step through the script, we go ahead and call that subscript. And again, this is just our steps here to go ahead and extract that information from our script parameter. And as you can see here, it all works. It's just, can look intimidating, but they're very simple functions that we're using. And as we look at the current view here now, you can see as I step through that it's starting to declare each of those values and bring them out. And now we are, ready to send our email, and we can just go ahead and let that script finish. All right. So like I said, very easy to use, but again, a little harder to maintain if you have to add a parameter. So that led me to the second method that I started using, and I had used this quite a bit. And that is, instead of like one of those special characters, actually go ahead and use like the paragraph or carriage return or the pilcrow as the separator between each of the values. All right. One of the things that you can do is that you can even improve the readability of the calculation that generates your parameter by using the list function, because you don't have to put the actual pilcrow symbols in. However, that comes with a trade-off, because if a value is blank, when you're using the list function, everything slides up, if you understand what I'm saying there. So if you have a blank value, all of a sudden, value number 3 is in value number 2 slot, and then who knows what's going to happen. Things end up all higgledy-piggledy. So that's where you have to be able to handle those null values if anything like that would occur. But then when you get to extracting your values, once you get to your subscript, it's just a matter of using the get value function, which you can see there is much simpler, where you just pass it the list of values and then the number of the value that you want. So as we move towards our example, if we continue with our string 1, string 2, and string 3, again separated by those pilcrow characters, then the calculation for the first parameter is just get value, get script parameter number 1. Second value is just number 2, and then number 3. So it greatly simplifies the code that we're looking at when you go for like debugging and things like that. So let's go ahead and turn script debugger back on. We'll go ahead and click the send button, which again is passing our parameter, and we're going to go ahead and just zip through the calculations here, and then go ahead and assemble our parameter. Again, let me go ahead and pull up our data viewer. And you can see here now is when I double click in, instead of having everything jammed on a single line, now everything is definitely as values. So you can definitely see, okay, subject, or the to, the CC, the subject, and then the rest of the message. So it makes things a little bit easier there. And then we can go ahead and step into our subscript, which again, there's our set variable steps, which you can see are greatly simplified because we're using just 2 different functions, the get value and get script parameter. The only one that's a little bit different, and that is because of the nature of the message, is that I can't get a single value because obviously it has many values because of the returns and the formatted email and everything. So we just go ahead and get the right values minus our first 3. So sometimes you do need to do something like that to get the values out if you're using the return separated list option. All right, but you can see we still get all of our values over here in our data viewer, and now we're ready to send our message, and off it goes. All right, so that is special characters. That is the return separated list example. Now the next one is one that I have not used very much, just because when I first heard about it, I was fairly new to FileMaker, and it seemed intimidating. I don't know why it was, because now it's like, okay, yeah, now I understand exactly what's happening. But it is called let notation, and that takes advantage of the behavior of 2 specific functions that we have access to within FileMaker. One is the let function, which you can see there, which sets variable or variables to the results of the expressions that you've defined for the duration of the calculation or for the script or until the file is closed. So what does that mean? All right, well, as you can see here, it starts out with let, and then you can start defining variables that are equal to some type of expression, which is could be a field, could be some combination of functions and fields to get a result. And then you can put them, if you have multiple values or variables that you're defining, you can place them in these square brackets that I kind of have just grayed out, so you can see that those are optional if you're dealing with more than one variable. But what's really neat is that in addition to declaring these function or level variables that are only for while the function is being evaluated, you can also declare local script variables, or those single $sign variables, without having to use an actual set variable command or script step. And so what that does is when you couple that behavior with the evaluate function, you can actually dynamically declare your local script variables. Because the evaluate, what it does is it takes a text expression and then evaluates it as a calculation. So obviously you have to be careful to make sure that everything is formatted correctly, because if the expression is incorrect, because it is just text as you're building it, FileMaker's not going to necessarily know that there's a problem with the syntax or anything, and so you won't know until it actually tries to evaluate. Okay, there's a lot of great information on this if you go to the FileMakerStandards.org website, which is a community-run collection of best practices and things. That's where I found out my information on the let notation. So I encourage you to check that out if you want to learn a little bit more. All right, so using let and evaluate, what does that mean then for our scripts? All right, well, what that does is that the script parameter calculation could look like this, going back to our 3 values. And that's where what really makes this helpful is we're able to look at name value pairs. Instead of having 3 or 4 or 10 values that we don't know, okay, was this the to email, was this the CC, was this the BCC, you can actually declare what it is. And so what you see here, now this is a little harder to read because of things being escaped out, because again, we have to set it up as a text string, all right? And so it is here, you've got, the name is equal to our string variable, our name number 2 is equal to, string number 2, and then we get down here and then name 3 is equal to this other variable that we've defined. And that becomes the parameter that we pass. And then once we get to our subscript that's running that calculation to extract the name value pairs would be this, where we have our let function with the bracket, then we insert our script parameter, which is formatted with the $sign variable equal to some value with semicolon separators, and then we get to the closing square bracket. That's part of the let function's syntax. And then we have a result of nothing. And then we evaluate that because we've built our text string. All right. And where this, there's a couple advantages. One I already mentioned because you have your name value pairs now that you're passing. Also, if you need to add a fourth or a fifth parameter or value, you can just go ahead and include it in the parameter. But then once you get to the script that is taking that parameter, you don't need to do anything, at least as far as extracting it, because it's just going to automatically happen because you're declaring those local script variables dynamically. All right, so let's go ahead and reopen Script Debugger so we can go ahead and take a look here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click the button, sending our email, and we step into it again, just step through these values to calculate. All right, and you can see there is our calculation. Again, we've declared local variables that have the email prefix, but when I'm actually assembling the parameter, I'm just going ahead and leaving that off, so it can be the names do not have to match the variables that you're using as you're building the values that you're passing. All right, so if I go ahead and step into that, now we go ahead and open Script Debugger once again. You can see that our parameter now looks like this, where we've got $2 equals, in quotes, an email address, and then $CCC equals, and then we have our CC email in quotes. Same thing with $subject is that, and then our message is from here enclosed in quotes. All right, so everything's looking good so far. So that becomes our parameter. And now we're ready to go ahead and step into. All right, now you'll see that this here is obviously a little bit more, it's a little simplified. We don't have 4 set variable steps. And I went ahead and broke this out just so that we could see it. I could have jammed it all into one. But first, let's go ahead and see what our calculation looks like now that we have our script parameter. So go ahead and click that. It appears here in my data viewer. So let me go ahead and drill into that. And here we now have a let function as text that we can define. And here is the parameter that we passed. And then everything else was just included to make sure the formatting was correct for the syntax of the let function. So that all looks good. And so now I can go over here and run my next step, which is just going to then use the evaluate function to evaluate that text string. All right. So when I do that, if you look over at the data viewer, you'll see that all of a sudden I now have 4 variables have been defined, but I only had to run a single script step to get those values out. And then with my values declared, I'm ready to go ahead and step and send the email. Now the one thing I noticed as I was experimenting with this, you'll notice that in the message, once we've pulled it back out, we've lost some of our formatting. So that's a case there where you may need to replace the carriage returns with some type of character and then substitute it back once you get into your script and you start pulling out your parameters. But it's very simple. Like I said, you'll always know what the value is because it's a name value pair, and then you can always add an additional one if you need to. You just have to make sure your parameter itself is formatted correctly. All right, so we can just go ahead and finish that. All right, so that is our 4th example with our let notation. So we have one more to go, and this is actually my preferred method, and that is using a JSON object to pass my parameter to my script. Okay, since FileMaker 16, we've had access to native JSON functions, which is just a standard for assembling name value pairs of information. You can also do some crazy stuff. You can have nested arrays and other nested objects and things like that. But typically for a script parameter, you don't need to get too crazy with that. But there's 3 functions that you're going to be using for this method. Obviously, the first one is the JSON set element function, which adds or modifies an element in the JSON data specified by the object name, the array index, or the path. And you can see that it's broken out there where we have the JSON object that we're defining, what the the name. So you continue to use our name value pair. So what our name is, what the value is, and then just the type of object. Is it a string? Is it a number? What exactly is it? And then once we get into the script where we're receiving that parameter, then we just use the JSON list keys and JSON get element to then go ahead and pull that information out, where the JSON list keys just, you say, this is my JSON object, what are all of the names of information that have been passed to it. And then once you know those names, then you just step through and get the elements, the values that correspond for each of those names, and that's with the JSON get element function. Okay, so pretty straightforward stuff there. Now where this one can get a little interesting is that I implemented using the while function, which is brand new, starting with FileMaker 18. And it behaves very similar to the let function, except that in addition to being able to declare variables and things like that, as you step through, you're actually able to repeat a section of logic. Okay, that's where the let notation example is a little bit nicer, in that you just have everything all laid out and it just evaluates one simple function. Because of how the JSON is constructed, I needed to do some stuff to be able to loop through, however many name value pairs I'm passing, I need to be able to loop through it that number of times in order to extract all of the values. So this is the while function, where you have your initial variables, you have your condition, that is, while the condition is true, the logic is repeated, and then it gets the result. So what does that then look like for us? Okay, well, the script parameter calculation would look like this, where you have your JSON element, and just the curly braces here is just the name of the JSON object that I'm declaring. And the one nice thing about the way the JSON set element function works is that if you use the square brackets separated by the semicolon, instead of having to have 3 or 5 or 10, depending on how many parameters or name value pairs you want to pass, you don't have to use the JSON set element that number of times. You can just put each name, value, and data type within those square brackets, and it just, again, I like it because it makes the code fairly easy to read as you're stepping through. All right, so we've just got our name 1, string 1, and it's a JSON string. Now I went ahead and I like to add in the JSON format elements once I get to the end, just because it then formats that JSON object for the white space. Just makes it a little bit more, to me, readable, especially when you're doing troubleshooting. So it certainly doesn't have to be there, but I like it just for that very reason. All right, so that's what the script parameter calculation would look like. Now our calculation to then pull that information out is a little bit more complex, as you can see. But again, like I said, it's using the while function. All right, but then it is also relying on what we are doing with the let notation, where we're getting our key or our name, we're getting our value, and then we are declaring a local variable dynamically on the fly. All right, so let's just take a look at that. So we've got the while in that first set of square brackets. These are our default values. So we need to make sure that our index is 0, the output is 0, and that's just something that I had to do because I couldn't have something that didn't give me an actual output. But then we get our list of our key list, which is our names from our script parameter, and then we also get the total number. And then our condition is that as long as the index value is less than the number of values that we have, just go ahead and keep repeating this logic. All right, so we increment our index by 1 as we get into the section of logic that is repeated, and then it just does our key is to get the value out of our key list, again using the get value function that we looked at a little bit earlier, and then our value is just the using the JSON get element function of our script parameter with that particular key. And then our output is when we just take the evaluate function where we've got our let string, where we've got let, our square bracket with our $sign, then we insert the key, then this is some more text here with the equal, and then we just quote the value, and we evaluate that let function, and that declares the variable for us. So let's go ahead and go back in, turn on our script debugger so we can see what's going on, and go ahead and click send mail for the last time here today. So as we step through, again, we're just declaring our 4 pieces of information. Now go ahead and assemble our parameter. And let's go ahead and open up the data viewer once again so we can see that. And so now this is what our JSON object script parameter looks like, where here is our CC, our message is here, which goes the whole way down through here. Then we have our subject, which is here, and our to, and then the address. All right, so again, like I said, I like this just because of how readable it is, especially when you're doing troubleshooting and things. And you also notice here that JSON recognized the returns that were as part of our email message. So it's just gone ahead and thrown in this \R symbol. Didn't have to do any extra work, it just automatically puts it in there. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and step into the script and pass that parameter. All right, so here's our function with our while loop, and then step into it, and you can see over here we've got our 4 variables have been declared, as well as our set variable. I just put that, again, that was something I needed to have an output when I set this up, so it just kind of echoes the number of name value pairs that are. So as long as I see 4, knowing that I passed 4 name value pairs, I know that everything is good. And now what's nice with the JSON object compared to the let notation is that now when I get into my message, you'll see that it's gone ahead and replaced the /r's that were part of the script parameter. It's gone ahead and put those pilcrows or the carriage returns back in, so that when I generate the message, everything is still going to look nice in the way that I would expect it to be. So that's certainly another benefit there. All right, and then we can just go ahead and send our message. So those are, like I said, the I guess 5 methods for passing parameters to scripts. I guess technically there's a 6th one, which is to not pass parameters at all, but I think you can see that there's obviously an advantage to using parameters, hopefully, and you'll be able to start using it in your own development. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and see if we have any questions here. All right, so one of the questions is that obviously, and it's displayed right here, is that the while function can be a little cumbersome, just because there's a lot going on there, and you're going to want to make sure that you have it correct. But it is certainly repeatable code. It's never going to change as long as the JSON is formatted correctly. So actually what I've done in most of my FileMaker development is I've actually created a custom function that accepts my JSON object script parameter, and it has all of this built into it, into that custom function. And so all I had to do is call the custom function with the get script parameter, and then I get however many name value pairs out of it as the local variables that I need. So it makes it very portable to import that custom function into a new solution whenever I need that. All right, let's see, any other questions here? All right, I guess I do have a question because there is also the ability that FileMaker gives us, just in the same way that we can pass a parameter to a script, we can have a script return a result, okay? And any one of these methods obviously is going to work. as far as how you format that script result. The only difference is once you get back to the parent script that is expecting that result, you just use a different get function, which is get script result. So they did not make it very hard for us to remember script parameter or script result. The one thing I will say, though, just a little bit of a caution, is that when you're in your script that has been passed a parameter, at any point you can use the get script parameter function, and it's going to tell you these are the parameters that were passed to it. However, the script result is only going to tell you the result from the most recently executed script. So if you have a script that calls a subscript called script A that returns a result, and then you do some more work in your script, and then you do a perform script of script B, which does not return any result, and then you do a little bit more in your parent script once you come back from script B, what happens is that if you use get script result, it's not going to get you the result of the script that returned the result, which is A. It's going to return the result from the most recently executed script, which is script B, which of course is a blank value. And so that's where a lot of times, I know I will do this, I think it's pretty common practice among FileMaker developers everywhere, is that you will capture the script parameter in a local variable as soon as the script starts, and at any time you are performing a subscript and control comes back to the parent script, you'll go ahead and use a set variable there to capture the script result. So if you need it later on after other scripts have been executed, you'll still be able to use that in that parent script. All right, I think that's all the questions that we have. I know I've went a little bit over time. We try to keep this to about a half an hour, and I see that I'm already a little bit over time. But if you like what you saw today, please click the thumbs up. Also, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down at the bottom. We will be back the third Wednesday of October with another Lunch and Learn, and we certainly hope to see you there. Have a great day, everyone.